A young boy is thrust into a brutal rite of passage that will test his courage and strength against the unforgiving elements of winter. The frigid air stung Bjorn's lungs as he stepped outside. The world blanketed in a thick layer of snow that crunched beneath his bare feet. Pine resin torches flickered in the dark, casting long shadows that danced across the warriors' faces, their expressions solemn and expectant. He could feel the weight of the bone-handled knife at his side, its runes shimmering in the torchlight like whispers of fate. This was it. The moment that would either forge him into a man or bury him in the icy grip of failure. But would he find the strength to endure what lay ahead? Silence hung heavy, a palpable tension that pressed against his chest. The village elders, wrapped in furs, watched him with eyes that seemed to pierce through the cold. They didn't call it cruelty. They called it strength. In their world, courage was the currency of survival, and failure could mean death. 20% of boys like him never returned from this initiation rite. As he stared into the dark woods, he could almost hear the specters of those who had come before him, their silent lament echoing in the biting wind. The temperature hovered around 15 degrees Celsius, and he fought to suppress the shivers that threatened to betray his resolve. He could feel the blood rushing in his ears, the pounding of his heart drowning out any rational thought. The elders gestured for him to move forward. Each step was a battle against the elements, against the gnawing doubt that twisted like the branches overhead. What awaited him in the heart of that frozen wilderness? With every stride, Bjorn cast a glance back at the flickering torches, their light a fragile comfort against the encroaching darkness. His fingers brushed against the knife, a reminder of the task at hand, and he breathed deeply, tasting the acrid scent of burning wood mingling with the crispness of winter. It was easy to feel small as a boy, dwarfed by the towering trees and the weight of legacy. But was he truly ready for this moment? As he reached the threshold of the woods, a howl pierced the silence, a sound both terrifying and exhilarating. The elders exchanged glances, their faces etched with a mixture of pride and apprehension. They had set this boy on the path, but the outcome was never guaranteed. And just as he crossed into the dark embrace of the forest, Bjorn felt the chill deepen, each breath becoming a reminder that the end was not assured. He hesitated for a heartbeat, the shadows closing in around him. In that moment, he didn't just feel fear. He felt the stark weight of duty to his clan, the call of fate that beckoned him forward. They had given him no instructions, only silence, and what waited in that void. Was it human? A torch flickers in the chilling grip of an unforgiving winter night. The acrid scent of burning pine resin cuts through the cold, a desperate attempt to ward off the frost that bites at exposed skin. A boy stands at the edge of the clearing, his breath clouding the air before him like a ghost, each exhale a reminder of how alive he still is. Just weeks shy of his 15th winter, he shivers, not just from the biting cold that hovers around 15 degrees Celsius, but from the weight of what he is about to face. This is no ordinary winter night. It is an initiation, a forge to turn boy into man, or in many cases, a tomb for the unworthy. His feet, bare against the frozen ground, seem to absorb the cold like a sponge. Around him, the trees loom like ancient sentinels, their dark silhouettes twisted in the flickering torchlight. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howls, a sound that dances on the breeze and settles like a stone in his stomach. But silence is expected here. Fear is shameful. He clutches a bone-handled knife that glimmers with simple runes, a token of his heritage. It is both a promise and a curse. Will it serve him in the unraveling chaos that awaits? The other boys stand in a semicircle, their faces a mixture of encouragement and apprehension. They have all heard the stories, how roughly 20% of initiates never return from this trial. But what made these warriors impervious to fear? Was it the glint of glory they sought, or the crushing weight of expectation from their families? The boy gazes into the eyes of his peers, seeking strength in their shared resolve. But even as he steels himself, doubt creeps in like the frost that coats the pines. What if he fails? Then, the horn sounds. A deliberate, resonant echo that slices through the night air, and suddenly, everything shifts. The clearing transforms into an arena of fear, a battleground where demons take shape and shadows elongate. The other boys step back, creating space for him to enter, yet something deeper holds him back. A primal instinct, urging him to run, to hide beneath the familiar warmth of his mother's cloak. But he cannot. The knife feels heavier now, the weight of destiny pressing against his palm. He takes a step forward, then another, each movement drawing him closer to the unknown that lies ahead. The flickering torchlight dances in a chaotic rhythm, illuminating twisted branches and snowflakes that tumble like lost souls from the dark sky above. With every heartbeat echoing in his ears, he feels the cold settle deeper into his bones. The boy raises the knife, its runes glowing briefly in the dim light, and for the first time he wonders, what truly awaits him in the shadows? As he crosses the threshold into the arena, where the wild animals and darker fears lurk, he feels his muscles tense, and the night grows heavier. He didn't cry. But would that be enough to keep him alive? Part 3. The Call to Adventure. Previously on. News of Viking raids spreads like wildfire, igniting a sense of urgency among neighboring kingdoms as they prepare for the impending threat. As the sun dipped below the jagged horizon, casting an orange hue over the snow-slicked fields, whispers of impending doom snaked their way into the ear of every lord and lady. The air was thick with apprehension, like the moment before a storm breaks. "Imagine this," a messenger shouted, a bone-handled knife glimmering at his belt, its runes barely visible against the encroaching twilight. "Vikings are coming." His voice carried through the cold, biting air, piercing the gathered crowd like a pine resin torch flickering against the dark. The lords shifted uneasily in their furs, fingers fidgeting with the ornate brooches adorning their cloaks. In the heart of the hall, King Aurelius stood, his face a mask of stoic resolve. But even he felt the tremors of fear rattling his bones. Would they be able to withstand the relentless tide? The Vikings were not known for their mercy, and across the cold waters of the North Sea, they prowled like wolves hungry for flesh. He could almost see it. Long ships slicing through churning waves, dragon-headed prows piercing the fog, warriors laughing as they prepared for war. The cold of January was upon them, temperatures plunging to a bone-numbing 20 degrees. But what made these warriors impervious to fear? As the lords debated, voices rose and fell, an orchestra of panic and bravado. "We need to fortify the walls," cried one, gnawing on the edge of his tunic, his wide eyes darting to the flickering shadows. "Arm the men. We'll need every sword and shield." But fear was palpable, weaving through the hall like the acrid scent of burning wood smoldering on a winter's night. The talk of warriors and battle plans couldn't mask the grim reality that roughly 20% of those who would take up arms would never return. An initiation into death that loomed like a ghost over the assembly. Aurelius cleared his throat, his voice resonating with authority. "If we stand together, we will withstand this threat." But inside, he battled his own uncertainty. Would courage be enough against the ferocity of those who feared nothing? The lords quieted, eyes drawn to the flickering light of the torches, shadows dancing across their anxious faces. The more they spoke of valor, the more he could feel his heart sink. With each word, the weight of the impending attack pressed down like snow accumulating on a fragile roof. Outside, the wind howled, carrying with it the distant cries of a battle yet to unfold. Each gust felt like a warning, a reminder that the world was shifting, and they had no choice but to prepare. The Viking threat was no mere tale spun to scare children. It was a tide rising, an unstoppable force. And what awaited them beyond their fortified walls was something they had never truly prepared for. Aurelius exhaled sharply, the breath hanging in the frigid air, and with it came the question that haunted him. Could they truly defend what was theirs? The fjords echoed with the low, haunting calls of seabirds, swooping and diving as if trying to warn against the storm gathering at the horizon. Imagine this. A longship glides across the frigid waters, its prow slicing through waves like a knife through flesh, each stroke of the oars pulling the crew closer to destiny. Pine resin torches flickered on the deck, casting dancing shadows over the weathered faces of the warriors, whose eyes gleamed with a mix of anticipation and ferocity. They were men shaped by the cold, forged in the heart of winter, where the average temperature dipped to a bone-numbing 15-degree Celsius. As the ship drew nearer to the rocky shore, a spectral fog began to swirl, enveloping their destination in a shroud of mystery. But what lay beyond the mist? The warriors exchanged glances, a silent understanding passing between them. They were not just men. They were harbingers of a new age, each one acutely aware that roughly 20% of their number would never return from the fray. Among them, a bone-handled knife, inscribed with simple runes, served as a reminder of those who had fallen before, a talisman against the fates that awaited them. Each heartbeat resonated like thunder in the charged air, a palpable tension vibrating through the wooden hull. The captain stood at the helm, his jaw set in grim determination. He surveyed the churning sea, feeling the weight of their ambition pressing down on him like the heavy winter clouds overhead. The horizon seemed to smirk at their audacity, daring them to press on into the unknown. Was it fear or courage that drove them? Or something deeper, a relentless thirst for glory that could only be quenched by conquest? As the ship approached the shore, the rhythmic splashes of the oars became a mantra of resolve, drowning out the whispers of doubt lurking in the back of their minds. The warriors clenched their weapons tightly, every runic inscription on their blades echoing promises of glory, revenge, and power. But behind the bravado, a flicker of uncertainty stirred. What awaited them on the other side of this cold, unforgiving water? The shore loomed larger, and the dripping fog clung to their skin like the chill of death. Their breaths came out in clouds, mingling with the mist, a reminder that the line between life and oblivion was as thin as the layer of ice forming on the ship's edge. The captain turned to his crew, raising his sword high, a glint of silver slicing through the gloom. They roared in response, a guttural sound rising from the depths of their souls, echoing through the fjords like a call to arms. But beneath the roar, a seed of doubt nestled deep within. The question of whether they were conquering the world or merely chasing shadows danced in the periphery of their minds. And as the ship ran aground, silence fell, thick and suffocating like a winter's frost. The warriors looked at one another, all realization dawning. This was only the beginning. Would they emerge as legends, or simply be lost to time? The sun dipped below the horizon, its last rays flickering across the icy waves like dying embers. Imagine this. A coastal village huddled against the biting cold, shrouded in an uneasy quiet. A boy, not much older than 14, rubbed his hands together, watching his breath condense in the air. The scent of pine resin torches crackled nearby, the flickering light casting long shadows that danced along the wooden huts. What thoughts swirled in his mind as the darkening sky loomed over the village? A harbinger of the unknown? Then came the sound, the faint but unmistakable rhythm of oars slicing through water, the soft whispers of a predator closing in on its prey. The boy's heart raced, hammering against his ribs. As he peered into the distance, the curved hull of a longship appeared, its dragon-headed prow charging through the waves. He had heard tales of these fearsome warriors, the Norsemen, who sailed across oceans, shattering the peace of sleepy villages like his. Were they gods or demons? Or, as fear swept through the village, the elders emerged from their homes, faces pale as the frost that clung to their doorways. They carried bone-handled knives, inscribed with simple runes, ancient sigils that whispered stories of valor and sacrifice. But the boy's hands felt empty, fingers trembling with uncertainty. He thought of the initiation failures, the 20% who never returned from their trials, and felt a chill deeper than the winter air. The longboat glided onto the shore, the thundering of its hull meeting solid ground. The Viking warriors, clad in layered furs and iron, leapt forward with a ferocity that turned the quiet village into a stage for chaos. They roared like the winds that battered the cliffs, their laughter mingling with the thrumming of drums. As they stormed the beach, the boy stood frozen, torn between terror and a primal curiosity. How could they act with such abandon, such fearless delight, as if this moment were a celebration? With every step the invaders took, the villagers retreated, their values of peace and community crashing against the fierce, raw power of a culture built on conquest. The boy's breath caught in his throat as he watched one warrior lift his weapon high, glinting in the torchlight like a beacon of doom. Would they see him as a threat, or merely a child caught in the tide of history? Amidst the chaos, a scream split the air, and the boy's heart sank. He hadn't even known his neighbors were ready to fight, but now their panic was palpable. The village was not just facing outsiders, it was facing a reckoning, an awakening to the brutal reality of survival. He felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him, suffocating and electric. And what would the world look like when it was finally done with this village? Ashes or stories whispered through the generations. He didn't cry. Instead, he stood rooted in the snow, watching the firelight flicker across the warriors' faces, wondering if he would ever know what it meant to be strong, or if this night would steal everything he held dear. Part 6, The Price of Glory, previously on. The Vikings' raid has concluded, leaving the villagers devastated while their attackers revel in their triumph. The village lay in shambles, frost clinging to the remains of thatched roofs, the air sharp enough to cut. Pine resin torches flickered through the wreckage, casting dancing shadows that made the destruction feel almost alive, as if the ghosts of those lost were seeking vengeance. Among the rubble, an elderly woman knelt, her fingers brushing the frozen earth. She traced the outline of her son's favorite toy, a small, bone-handled knife inscribed with runes. A gift meant to herald a bright future. Now just another reminder of what had been stolen. Across the clearing, the Vikings celebrated, their laughter piercing the chill like a knife through flesh. They raised their cups high, full of mead, the aroma of honey and spice mixing with the acrid scent of smoke from the burning village. In their eyes danced the fire of victory. But what did that victory cost? The men recounted tales of glory, each story punctuated with boastful roars, though somewhere, deep within, a hollow echo remained. As the villagers mourned, they banded together, their grief heavy enough to plow through the frost. The once vibrant colors of their clothing became muted against the backdrop of gray skies, and the children's laughter, so often heard, was silenced. And for those who returned to the village, what was left? The statistics were grim. Roughly 20% of boys never returned from raiding expeditions, their fates sealed in the icy depths of the seas, or, like the villagers, at the hands of the very warriors they feared. A boy, no older than 10, stood among the ruins, his cheeks streaked with soot. Each breath formed a ghostly cloud in the frosty air, his small hands tucked into the pockets of his coat. He had lost an elder brother this day, his spirit now a flickering flame among the Yule logs that would never be lit again. He watched as the Vikings laughed, their muscles flexing under bearskins, their bodies glistening with the spoils of war. Did they even know the weight of their triumph? Or was it all just a game of fetch? A fetch that ended somewhere far removed from the cries of the grieving? With the celebration lifting to a fever pitch, a heavy silence fell over the villagers. A silence that felt like a physical presence. The air thickened with unspoken words, shattered dreams, and the undeniable question: was honor worth the cost of human life? The boy turned away, the laughter fading into the distance, leaving behind an emptiness that seemed to swallow the very light around him. And as the cold deepened, the shadows lengthened. Could the echoes of joy ever drown out the cries of the lost? Part 7. The Seeds of Resistance. Previously on, survivors band together, forming alliances to resist further Viking incursions, igniting a spark of rebellion against the invaders. The scent of smoke curled through the air, mingling with the bitter cold that crept into the bones of the assembled villagers. They huddled close, the flickering light from the pine resin torches casting long shadows that danced across the hardened faces around the makeshift fire. The night was merciless, temperatures dipping to a numbing 15 degrees. Yet, against the chill of the world, warmth spread amongst them, a warmth forged in shared purpose. What if this was the moment they turned the tide? One man thought, surveying the small crowd with desperation burning in his chest. Gunnar stood at the forefront, his breath visible in the frigid air, each exhale a sign of life in a landscape that had become increasingly hostile. In his hand, he clutched a runic bone-handled knife, a family heirloom that had seen generations rise and fall. The blade gleamed faintly, a reminder of the blood spilled in the name of survival. And now, resistance. He raised it high, the torchlight illuminating the etched runes that whispered tales of old, tales that spoke of valor and fight. "We've lost too much to surrender now," he shouted, his voice rising against the howling wind. The villagers, a ragtag assembly of farmers, craftsmen, and the few warriors who had returned battered but alive, stared with eyes full of defiance. Each had felt the brutal hand of the invaders, approximately 20% of their sons failing to return from the Viking raids, lost to the sea or worse, claimed by the fire of plundering longships. Yet in that moment, they all shared an unspoken bond, forged from grief, igniting a flicker of rebellion within their hearts. Will we allow them to take what is ours? Gunnar's words hung heavy in the icy air, as if the very silence asked for answers. The wind shifted, howling like an enraged spirit, reflecting the turmoil within. Each villager felt the weight of their choice. They had hidden in the shadows for too long, waiting for the sting of loss to fade. Now, the time had come to challenge the darkness that threatened to engulf them. A murmur rippled through the crowd, voices rising in a chorus of determination, fueled by the ancestors' whispers and the flame's glow. They began to rally, plans taking shape like frost upon the earth, each one picturing their families behind them, defending against an enemy that saw them as less than human. But as Gunnar scanned their faces, he couldn't ignore the flicker of doubt that lingered among them. Would it be enough? Every heart beat with hope, but hope alone was a fragile thing against the brutal strength of Viking steel, a strength they had tasted all too well. The warmth of their resolve began to solidify, but deep inside, something gnawed at him. What if their defiance only led them to ruin? The wind howled louder, a ghostly wail that echoed their fears, and Gunnar gripped the knife tighter. They were ready to fight, but the question loomed larger than life itself. What if fighting back only cost them everything they had left? Block goal. Write a single cinematic camera shot up to 3,000 characters in modern American English. West Coast tone. Third-person omniscient style. Insert at least one rhetorical question. 1 per 300 words, and include 1-2 concrete Viking period details. Pine resin torches, runic bone-handled knife, 10 degrees EC to 20 degrees Celsius frost, 20% failure rate. End with a 20-50 word unresolved emotional hook following the hook rules. Imagine this. A fire crackles in a longhouse, its flickering light dancing across the faces of men and women wrapped in wool and animal hides, the scent of wood smoke mingling with roasted meat. Outside, the air bites at exposed skin, temperatures plummeting to a numbing 10 degrees. Inside, laughter and the clinking of mead horns punctuate the sharp, chill stillness of the Scandinavian winter nights. But what drove this relentless thirst for warmth, wealth, and conquest? Beneath the thatched roof, the community crouches close, sharing stories of gods and heroes. A boy, no older than 10, watches wide-eyed as his father unveils a bone-handled knife, its simple runes catching the firelight. "You'll need this." His father grins, an earnest promise blended with a hint of pride. The notion of a boy's initiation into the world of men is both exhilarating and terrifying. Roughly 20% of young warriors never returned from their first raid, and yet the call to adventure thrummed within them like the pulse of a war drum. The hearth's warmth juxtaposes the icy clutches of the outside world. For these Vikings, the fire wasn't merely a source of heat. It was a symbol of their resilience and community. Women, skilled in weaving and herbal medicine, shared their knowledge, ensuring that each generation was prepared for both the comforts of home and the perils of the sea. Stories of past glories wrapped around the villagers like the furs they wore, binding them to their shared identity and purpose, to explore, to conquer, to settle. But behind the bravado of these fierce warriors lay an unspoken fear. Was their way of life sustainable in an ever-changing world? As the night deepened, the crowd's laughter faded, replaced by a sobering acknowledgement of the challenges that lay ahead. The village was alive with ambition, yet the frost outside whispered of desolation and death. Those who ventured beyond the familiar coasts risked everything: adventure, glory, and even life itself. He didn't raise his hand. He didn't boast. Instead, he clutched the knife tighter as he stared into the flames, battling the tremors of uncertainty coiling in his gut. The next raid beckoned like a siren song, tantalizing yet terrifying. What awaited him beyond the horizon? She felt the weight of expectation as she watched him, her heart pounding with silent dread. Could she be brave enough to let him go? The fire crackled, mocking her thoughts, and she wondered if warmth would be enough to guard against the cold truths of fate. For Part 9, The Turning Tide. Previously on, the Vikings, emboldened by their earlier victories, begin to forge unexpected alliances that reshape the power landscape of Europe. The chill in the air bit deeper, a biting reminder that winter was relentless. Pine resin torches flickered, casting long shadows across the muddy ground where Viking warriors and their new allies stood shoulder to shoulder. Their breath plumed like ghosts in the twilight, a strange camaraderie forming among men who, only days before, would have drawn swords against one another. What turns the tide of history, if not the unlikeliest of friendships? Bjorn, a towering figure with a bone-handled knife strapped to his belt, scanned the horizon. He could feel the pulse of tension in the air, the hairs on the back of his neck standing on end. The frost on the ground whispered secrets of strategy and betrayal. Every crunch underfoot felt like a question lingering in the crisp air. Could these alliances withstand the brutal pressures that history often brought? Or would they dissolve like mist under the sun? Around him, the newly formed alliance was an odd sight. Frankish knights, their ornate armor still gleaming despite the filth of the battlefield, shared raucous laughter with hardened Viking raiders, the scent of burning wood and sweat mingling in a heady cocktail of desperation and hope. They were united under the banner of mutual benefit, a common enemy in the form of an expansive empire that threatened to engulf everything they held dear. They didn't call it desperation. They called it survival. But alliances were fragile things. The Vikings had a reputation for turning on their allies as quickly as they forged bonds, and the Franks were well aware of tales of betrayal. Bjorn clenched his jaw. Did the fear of betrayal loom over their heads like a storm cloud ready to burst? Or did they simply choose to ignore the whispers of their ancestors? He glanced over at a group of warriors huddled close, sharing tales of their victory while brandishing their swords, each story punctuated by laughter that echoed in the cold night. As night fell, the camp was alive with activity. Plans were drafted in hushed tones, and maps spread across rough-hewn tables illuminated by the flickering torchlight. Even as they strategized, Bjorn could feel the weight of probability pressing down on him. In the harsh landscape of their lives, almost 20% of boys who went to war never returned. It was a brutal reality, and yet, here he stood, contemplating fate and fortune amidst the camaraderie of shared ambitions. In the distance, a horn sounded, a signal for scouts to return. Tension snapped in the air, thick enough to cut. Bjorn squared his shoulders, readying himself for whatever news they might bring. Did he dare hope for victory, or was that simply inviting disappointment? The weight of uncertainty lingered, heavy. As the scouts approached, a hush fell over the camp, a collective stillness that danced at the edge of anticipation. He felt it in his bones, an inkling of an answer hovering just out of reach. The night was growing darker, and so too were the skies of their future. Would the alliances forged in the fire of desperation hold, or would they be reduced to ashes before the dawn? Block goal. Write a single cinematic camera shot up to 3,000 characters in modern American English, West Coast tone, third-person omniscient style. Insert at least one rhetorical question. Get one per 300 words, and include 1 to 2 concrete Viking period details, pine resin torches, runic bone-handled knife, 10 degrees C to 20 degrees C frost, high 20% failure rate. An icy wind howled through the narrow alleys of the fortified town, carrying whispers of despair. The defenders stood resolute, their breath puffing out like ghosts in the frigid air, temperatures plummeting to a bone-numbing 15 degrees. They huddled behind stone walls, their faces illuminated by flickering pine resin torches, the acrid scent of burning wood mingling with the sweat of their exertion. It was a scene straight out of a nightmare, a desperate stand against an enemy that seemed, at times, more myth than man. Across the plain, the Vikings gathered like a storm cloud, their war drums thundering through the night, shaking the very ground beneath them. Each thump resonated with primal energy, a steady pulse that echoed the heartbeats of the defenders, racing in sync with the impending doom. Did they know what awaited them on the battlefield? Or had they convinced themselves they were already dead? The defenders exchanged glances, grim determination etched into every furrowed brow. One of them, a towering figure named Eric, gripped a knife with a bone handle inscribed with runes, each character a testament to his lineage. He felt the weight of his ancestors' expectations bearing down on him, and he fought against the fear swelling in his throat. It was said that 20% of men who went into battle against the Vikings did not return. The thought gnawed at him like an unrelenting beast. As the first volley of arrows sliced through the air, Eric raised his shield, feeling the vibrations of impact as the projectiles clattered against the stone fortifications. He turned back to his comrades, and under the flickering torchlight, saw their faces hardened by resolve but glistening with uncertainty. Could they withstand the onslaught? Or would today be the day that their town fell? The last bastion crumbled under the weight of Viking ambition. The enemy surged forward, a wave of fur and steel. Eirik's grip tightened around the hilt of his knife, feeling the smooth runes against his palm as a surge of adrenaline coursed through him. He could hear their battle cries, a savage melody that mixed both fear and fury. It cut through the frost in a way that made his skin prickle. And he wondered, did the Vikings feel fear as they charged? Or was it simply a hunger for glory that drove them forward? The clash erupted. A cacophony of steel meeting steel, shouts drowning in the din of desperate survival. Eirik found himself at the forefront, fighting not just for his life, but for the heart of his community. Each swing of his knife a declaration of defiance against the encroaching darkness. But as the first lines of the enemy broke against the fortress, a question lingered in the cold air. Would their courage be enough to turn the tide? Or would history remember them as yet another footnote in the saga of the Vikings? The fort's walls shook violently as the first battering ram struck home, sending shards of stone flying. Eirik stumbled. He didn't want to fall. He couldn't. But the sound of breaking wood was a chilling whisper of what was to come. Block goal. Capture the rising tension of battle between Viking leaders and their foes, emphasizing the brutal tactics and fierce loyalty while immersing readers in the historical context. Include a rhetorical question and Viking period details. Imagine this. A sea of men moves like a thunderstorm across the frozen ground, swords raised and shields locked. Pine resin torches flicker, casting monstrous shadows that dance over the snow. The air is thick with the scent of cold metal and fear, a potent mix that ignites the primal instincts of warriors. They didn't call it mercy. They called it strength. And what awaited them beyond the horizon was the clash of titans. At the forefront stands Bjorn Ironfist, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the dim glow of the torches, muscles coiled and taut as the bowstring of a longbow. His eyes, aflame with an intensity that rivaled the flickering flames, scanned the horizon for their adversaries, the Franks. He knows every warrior in his ranks, from the greenest recruit to the battle-hardened veterans. But in this bitter chill, where the January frost bites at exposed skin, he feels an unsettling anxiety. What if this time they weren't prepared? As they approach, the enemy emerges from the shadows, a wall of armored men, their breath visible in the frigid air. A hushed stillness envelops the battlefield, as if the gods themselves pause to witness the inevitable carnage. Bjorn grips the bone-handled knife tucked into his belt, its runes glinting like promises of glory and death. But he knows the statistics. The rough truth that 1 in 5 men might not return from this slaughter. A chilling reality for those who fought and for those who waited at home. The horns sound, a thunderous herald of doom that shatters the silence. The Vikings surge forward with a primal roar, adrenaline coursing through their veins like fire. The initial clash is deafening, iron against iron, the shrieks of men mingling with the crack of shields splintering under the weight of brutal blows. Bjorn feels each impact resonate through his bones. This was not merely a fight for land or riches. This was a battle for pride, for glory, and for the legacy that would echo through generations. But as he swings his axe, cleaving through flesh and armor, he can't shake the question that haunts him. What if loyalty alone wasn't enough to ensure victory? He watches as men fall, some face down, their breath misting in the freezing air, while others rise again, driven by sheer force of will, each act of valor a testament to their unyielding allegiance to the Viking cause. The tide of battle shifts like the winds, unpredictable and ruthless. Bjorn's heart pounds with the rhythm of war, a beat that he knows could be silenced at any moment. Wolves howl in the distance, their cries mingling with the cries of men, a chilling reminder that nature itself is a spectator to this brutal spectacle. But as the clamor of battle rages on, Bjorn's gaze catches a glimpse of a familiar figure. His brother, Erik, locked in a fierce duel, both men equal in ferocity. Could loyalty transcend even blood in this dance of death? He lunges forward, desperate to reach him, but the swirling chaos pulls him back, and he realizes that in this moment, the outcome is uncertain. The clash of titans continues, but for Bjorn, victory is suddenly overshadowed by the terrifying thought that he might lose everything he holds dear. Eric's sword glints in the torchlight, and with every swing, Bjorn feels the chasm of fear deepen. Would this be the last battle of brotherhood? In the dying light of a winter's day, the village lay in ruins, smoke curling into the frigid air like the ghosts of those who once thrived here. Amidst the charred remnants of homes, half-burnt timber still smoldered, sending up sparks that danced into the stark gray sky. Pine resin torches flickered weakly, their acrid scent mingling with the tang of iron and ash. As the last echoes of battle faded, a heavy silence enveloped the landscape, broken only by the occasional crack of ice shifting beneath the weight of uncertainty. Thrain, a victorious chieftain, stood surveying the devastation, his breath visible in the icy air. Clutched tightly in his calloused hand was a bone-handled knife, its simple runes etched with the tales of his ancestors. He had fought bravely, leading his men into the heart of the fray. But as he gazed upon the fallen, a pang of doubt twisted within him. Was this the glory he had sought? Or had he unwittingly carved a path of ruin? The frost nipped at his skin, biting not only at his flesh but at the very essence of his spirit. Around him, his warriors celebrated their triumph, but their triumphant shouts held a hollow echo, reverberating against the desolate backdrop of loss. The chilling fact remained. For every 10 who had marched in battle, 1 would not return home. A grim statistic, yet here they stood, alive and battered, basking in victory that felt more like a curse. What price had they paid for their conquest? The spoils of war were seen as trophies, but the cost was etched deeper than the steel of their weapons. As twilight descended, shadows lengthened across the battlefield, merging with the growing dread that lurked in the hearts of both victors and vanquished. They had come not just for land, but for honor, for legacy. Yet in their wake, they left a trail of grief and unanswered questions. The villagers who had fled into the night might never return, their stories extinguished like the last flicker of a dying flame. Nights were bitter now, the temperatures dropping to a harsh 20 degrees. Yet a deeper chill settled in Thrain's bones. He could feel it, the weight of the choices they had made, dripping like the melting ice from the eaves of the burned homes. And as he turned away, the laughter of his men faded into an ominous silence, leaving him wondering if the price of conquest was too steep for any man to bear. He did not celebrate, nor did he sleep. Instead, he stared into the abyss of what had become of their ambitions, realizing that victory had not birthed the glory he longed for, but only a void surrounding him. What remained now but whispers of a better past? Block goal. Write a single cinematic camera shot up to 3,000 characters in modern American English. West Coast tone. Third-person omniscient style. Insert at least 1 rhetorical question, or 1 per 300 words, and include 1 to 2 concrete Viking period details. Pine resin torches, runic bone-handled knife, 10-degree Kasi to 20-degree Ost frost, 20% failure rate. The frost clung to the earth like whispered secrets, a persistent reminder of the harsh winters that shaped the people of this land. As the last embers of a once great Viking raid faded into the early morning light, the echoes of history began to resonate through the valleys and settlements. Pine resin torches sputtered in the distance, their acrid smoke mixing with the crisp chill, and the air was thick with anticipation. For many, life had become a game of survival, a dance upon the edge of death itself. How long could this fragile peace last, with tensions simmering like a pot ready to boil over? In the small village of York, where Norse tales of glory met the whispers of Saxon folklore, an uneasy coexistence flourished. Children played in the streets, their laughter mingling with the distant clang of blacksmiths, while mothers gathered to spin wool and share stories. The once distant Viking warriors were now family, lovers, and friends, their bone-handled knives etched with runes reflecting a shared destiny. The village elder, with skin like wrinkled parchment, often recalled the days before the conquests, when fear was a distant shadow and community was unbroken. But what did we truly gain? She would muse, her voice a mere breeze against the robust winds of change. As generations passed, Viking influence seeped deeper into the cultural fabric of Europe. The sagas woven from the fireside tales became a tapestry of identities, intertwining Norse and local traditions. Festivals celebrating the harvest included offerings that would make Thor proud, as the villagers donned helmets adorned with horns, blending their past with a future still undefined. Yet, amid the revelry, a stark truth remained. The fear of loss loomed large, and even the strongest warriors had faced a grim reality. Roughly 20% of boys never returned from their initiation, a haunting statistic that echoed through the hearts of the families. With the frost biting at their heels, the villagers understood that history was not just a series of events, but a living entity, nurturing and devouring all who dared to tread its paths. Each person carried within them the blood of ancestors, forged in the fires of conquest and shaped by the choices made in the face of adversity. They often gathered around the flickering flames, the warmth of the torches barely enough to stave off the cold, as stories of bravery and loss flowed freely. Each tale anchored them in their shared experience, a reminder that they were all part of a larger saga, one still unfolding. In the quiet of the night, when stars hung like ancient sentinels, the villagers would gaze into the darkness and wonder, what would the future hold? Would they thrive in this new world? Or would the echoes of their forebears return to haunt them once more? The answers lay hidden, shrouded in the mist of time. And as the embers glowed ever dimmer, a question lingered in the air. Could unity forged in conquest withstand the trials of a world forever changed? Block goal. Write a single cinematic camera shot up to 3,000 characters in modern American English, West Coast tone, third-person omniscient style. Insert at least one rhetorical question, 1 per 300 words, and include 1 to 2 concrete Viking period details, pine resin torches, runic bone-handled knife, 10 degree to 20 degrees frost, 20% failure rate. End with a 20 to 50 word unresolved emotional hook following the hook rules. Imagine this. A woman stands in the fading light of a winter evening, the chill of the air biting into her skin like 1,000 tiny frostbitten needles. The wooden houses, once vibrant, now sag under the weight of sorrow, their thatched roofs bowed as if mourning. Around her, the villagers gather, eyes heavy with the burden of their losses. The flickering glow of pine resin torches casting long shadows that dance like phantoms against the snow. Silence reigns, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the sound of a child's muffled sobs somewhere in the crowd. What does it mean to survive when everything familiar has been torn away? She clutches a bone-handled knife, its surface etched with simple runes, a remnant of a life that feels like a distant memory. It gleams in the torchlight, a stark reminder of the violence that had swept through their village, like a wild winter wind that sweeps across the fjords, leaving destruction in its wake. The smell of burning wood lingers in the air, a scent that once signified warmth and community, but now brings only the bitter taste of regret and loss. The first frost of the season settles around them, the temperature dipping to a bone-chilling 15 degrees C, and each breath crystallizes in the air, mingling with their fears. As the villagers exchange glances, there's an unspoken recognition that their identities have shifted, reshaped by the scars of war. Some wear anger like a cloak, their expressions hardened, while others look at the ground, their faces shadowed in despair. But it is the few who stand firm, voices rising against the encroaching silence, who set the course for the future. We cannot let them define us, one man declares, his voice laced with a fire that cuts through the frigid air. But deep down, another question stirs. Can they reclaim what they have lost? Or are they forever marked by the brutality of their past? The villagers nod, yet doubt lingers like the frost on their lashes as they grapple with the reality that around 20% of their kinfolk never returned from the raids. What does it mean to rebuild in the shadow of such loss? A collective sigh rises from the group, a sound that carries the weight of grief and the flicker of hope. But just as the embers of resolve begin to glow, a distant horn echoes in the night, chilling their bones anew. Its sound spirals through the air, a harbinger of something uncertain, and in that moment, they realize that the reckoning of their identities is only just beginning. The woman's grip tightens around the knife, and as the pale moonlight bathes the scene, she wonders, what new face will she wear when the dawn finally breaks? As the sun crests the horizon, painting the frost-bitten fields in hues of gold and rose, the echoes of battle begin to fade like distant thunder. The chill in the air still bites deep, temperatures hovering around 10° to 20°, but it carries a new promise, one that whispers of unity. In the quaint village of Ribe, fishing boats sway gently in the harbor, their sails stitched from both Viking hide and Frankish cloth, a symbol of what had once been inconceivable. Here, cultures intertwine, woven together like the threads of a tapestry, vibrant and chaotic. Children race through the streets, their laughter ringing out as they chase each other, their breaths a cloud of warmth against the biting cold. A boy wields a bone-handled knife, inscribed with simple runes, an heirloom passed down from a father who had once fought beneath the banners of Norse gods. But now, the knife is not a symbol of war. It is a tool of creation, of cooking and crafting, a symbol of survival amid the ashes of what had been. The village square, once a site of violent sacrifice, now hosts lively markets where Norsemen and locals barter goods, exchanging not just food and wares, but stories, traditions, and laughter. The pine resin torches flicker in the cold gusts of winds that sweep through the cobbled streets, illuminating the faces of those who gather to share in this new beginning. They come not only to trade, but to heal, to speak of loss and hope, of the brothers and sisters lost in the conflicts that had once divided them. In the flickering torchlight, are they finally ready to forgive? Can the past ever truly be reconciled? It is a time for new legends to be born, legends of unity rather than division. The Viking Age had carved deep scars across the landscape of Europe, a history marked by bloodshed and fear. But this dawn brings an opportunity to redefine their identity. The old ways still hold sway, with echoes of gods and warriors in the tales spun by the fireside, yet they are tempered by the need for peace. This fragile blend of cultures is both a tapestry and a crucible, forged in the fires of conflict, yet tempered by the promise of a shared future. As the sun rises higher, casting aside the shadows of the past, a question lingers in the air. Can they truly lay down their swords and embrace this new way of life? Or will the legacy of the Vikings ultimately forge chains of discord anew? Amid the laughter, the warmth, and the scent of fresh bread, a flicker of doubt remains. For war had left its mark, and even in peace, can trust ever truly flourish?